and Ebert reviewed Tom Hanks transform from a boy into a man in the comedy Big. Chevy Chase swaps Manhattan for country life in Funny Farm. Paul Hogan heads back to Australia in Crocodile Dundee 2. And Sylvester Stallone joins Afghan freedom fighters in Rambo 3. It's all coming up next on Siskel and Ebert.
Life in the country has a few surprises in store for Chevy Chase and Madeline Smith in the new comedy Funny Farm, which is one of 5 new movies we're going to review this week on Siskel and Ebert. I'm Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times.
And I'm Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune. Our first film is a true delight, an old-fashioned American comedy with a tight script by Jeffrey Boehm, made even funnier by the sharp direction of veteran George Roy Hill. Chevy Chase stars as a New York sports writer who takes his wife to the country to try a new life that includes writing a novel in a gorgeous country setting. Madeline Smith, the other woman in Urban Cowboy, plays Chase's dutiful wife.
Wait. This is our first real house. I'll carry you in.
Oh. I heard that.
Nonsense, you're light as a feather. Jeez. Oh. Honey, oh, God.
That's fabulous. I haven't seen that sight gag ever before. Of course, you'd expect all sorts of misadventures as the city slickers meet their match with the country folk. But these misadventures in this film are fresh and very funny. For example, when Chase and his wife can't convince the local operators that their home phone is not a pay phone.
Please, sir, just drop a couple of dimes in the slot, and I will happily complete your call as requested.
What slot? There is no slot. Haven't you been listening to me? This is not a payphone. This is a table model with a 12-inch cord that some jackass put in my cabin.
Disconnect. Vulgar and abusive language. That's an automatic disconnect.
Operator.
Yes, hello. This is Dr. Grell from the Utilities Commission. May I speak with the sheriff, please? We have a fire. It's very urgent.
Nice try, Mr. Farmer.
Sheriff's office, please.
You gotta get up earlier in the morning than that, Farmer. I know the sound of 2 pennies being dropped into a jelly jar.
And then there's that memorable night on the town when Chevy Chase sets a record for eating a local delicacy called lamb fries.
You polish off that plate and you break the record. 28. That one makes 26.
Stand back, everybody. The record falls tonight.
Look at him go.
I believe he's right. I believe that record will fall tonight.
27.
It stood at 28 for nearly 2 years now.
That long? Go for it, Andrew.
28.
That's a tie. The new record! And it's still going. I thought that record was gonna last forever. Most folks just don't seem to have a taste for testicles no more.
Testicles?
Yes, ma'am. Sheep balls.
That is a really big laugh. And, you know, critics get criticized all the time. Well, you show us all the good scenes, and then when we go to the movie, it's ruined it. Well, we haven't ruined this picture for you. There are easily a dozen, maybe even 24 truly funny moments in Funny Farm. Writer Jeffrey Boehm, whose credits include Dustin Hoffman's crime film Straight Time. Boy, he can do crime films and comedy. He's one heck of a writer. And some of these scenes, many of these scenes, actually are sort of updates of the work of the great American satirist Preston Sturges, who had a jaundiced eye, but could also get a belly laugh out of simple town folks. Director George Roy Hill, Butch Cassidy, Slapshot, The Sting, he's one of our best directors, hardly a household name, but he knows precisely when to end every scene, when to cut away from action that is not important. The film was edited with him by Alan Heim, who worked on such distinguished films as All That Jazz and Lenny, Network. He did a terrific job editing this film, too. One more technical credit, Miroslav Andrzejczyk, who filmed Amadeus and Hair. He makes the countryside glisten. Who have I left out? Only the stars. Chevy Chase, Madeline Smith, who are fine individually, shaky a little bit in the beginning as a couple, but then they become part of what really is a great team effort on this little comedy called Funny Farm. I think it's the best summer movie I've seen.
Well, this is the best work I've seen Chevy Chase do in a movie probably ever.
Well,
I mean, for
Fletch
once,
was
he's
great,
not always standing there and simply making his little kind of Saturday Night Live aside. So I don't want to criticize. He's been in some other good movies. This is his best work.
He got the best script.
It's the best script, it's the best direction, it's the best ensemble acting by all of those townspeople. I mean, the idea of having a town inhabited by a lot of weirdos is not new.
That's correct.
But these are new weirdos. And these are new ideas for what to do with the weirdos, so that this is not just another recycled City Slickers Go to the Country movie. It blindsides us with a lot of these jokes.
You see the phone operators, you expect them to be variations on, like, Ernestine, or something like that, with Lily Tomlin, or some old joke on old people. They're very funny. You can't try the 2 pennies in the dish. I mean, that scene had 4 or 5 big funny laughs. This Jeffrey Boehm can write a funny movie.
What this movie has, and this is going to sound like a strange statement, is a sense of humor. I think they were smiling the whole time they made it. There are a lot of comedies that are machine-made, and the jokes come out, and you're supposed to laugh because of the timing and so forth. This movie is genuinely funny, and that's the bottom line.
And I go to the script as the main credit.
Okay, Jeffrey Boehm. Now, next movie. Our next movie is Rambo 3, the further adventures of John Rambo, Vietnam veteran and one-man army, as played by Sylvester Stallone as a man of increasingly fewer words. In fact, although I didn't have an opportunity to count every word in Rambo, and I don't think I'll go back to do that.
Actually, you did have an opportunity. Well, you chose not to do it.
Time. I'd be willing to bet that Stallone speaks fewer than 200 words in the entire movie. Of course, he makes up for that with a lot of action scenes. The story this time finds Rambo in semi-retirement, putting a new roof on the temple of some Buddhist monks that he lives with in Thailand. Then one day, he gets a visitor, Richard Crenna, as his old superior officer and best friend, who wants him to go on a mission against the Russians in Afghanistan.
I know the reasons you're here, John, but it doesn't work that way. You may try, but you can't get away from what you really are.
And what do you think I am?
A full-blooded combat soldier.
Not anymore. I don't want it.
That's too bad, because you're stuck with it. You're always going to be tearing away at yourself until you come to terms with what you are. Until you come full circle.
A little later, though, when Rambo finds out that the Russians have captured his friend, he changes his mind.
From what we've gathered, Troutman and the rest of his party have been taken to a regional command post.
What about me?
What about you?
Can you get me in?
In Afghanistan, Russian helicopters attack Rambo and the local freedom fighter. A lot of the movie involves Rambo's attempt to infiltrate the Russian fortress where his friend is being tortured. But look how this scene ends. I always love it when Rambo can jump out of the water, know exactly where to shoot, and he doesn't even have to look first, and his gun is never waterlogged. Rambo 3 is kind of a hard movie to review, and I'm going to tell you why. Because just on the merchandising level, talking about the movie at retail, where you pay your $6 or $7 and you take your seat and look at the movie, it does deliver the goods. It provides what it promises. Lots of action, lots of stunts, explosions, special effects, a lot of excitement. I don't fault it there, but what I miss is any other level above that basic action level. Stallone has shown before that he can be an interesting actor with a good sense of humor, but here he seems to want to play Rambo as kind of a fighting machine. I know that's the idea, but still, it robs the movie of its humanity, of the kind of wit and self-satire that makes something like the James Bond pictures work better with a lot of the same kinds of material. Rambo 3 has the hardware, but it doesn't have the heart. I don't know how to review it. I guess yes to the fact that it delivers, and no to the fact that it doesn't do anything more than deliver. So finally, like this. But how do I got those flying thumbs again, right? Okay, go ahead.
I just want to let you sit there and stew.
I'm just busy with my thumbs.
Yes, all right. Now, here comes the definitive answer.
Good,
Very
good.
easy.
Okay, fine.
Thumbs up.
Okay.
And the reason is because it does deliver. It would be a better film if it had a heart, which Rambo 2 did. A real cause. Admittedly simplistic, but mourning for the missing in action soldiers. You're right about it. This does not take the side of the Afghanistans. We don't get into that problem. We don't feel for it at all. You're right. But on the physical stunt level and excitement level, entertainment level, for me, the film works. It gets a pass on that score.
Well, okay.
It's the identical review. but I just give it up.
Yeah,
I say
so
it's good. It entertained me.
It's interesting. We are kind of right here in the middle on that one.
I liked it.
You're on the
I'm
top
just
and I'm in the
definitive.
middle. Okay, fine. Coming up next, a comic love story starring Tom Hanks. It has a short title, but that title is big.
No, really, I'll watch.
Come on, it's fun. I'll do it with you. Come on.
The film is called Big, and it's the fourth movie in about the last year and a half to feature the theme of adults and children changing bodies. You would think that subject had been mined to death. I certainly wasn't excited about walking in to see Big, but just as one of those earlier films, Vice Versa, worked because of Judge Reinhold's wonderful impersonation of a boy inside a man's body, so succeeds the film Big, with Tom Hanks doing a fine job of playing a short 12-year-old boy who gets his wish and becomes a big 35-year-old man working at a toy company. One of his classmates, in on the secret, can't believe Hanks' good fortune.
So what did he make you do for all this?
Well, I play with all of this stuff, and then I go in and I tell them what I think.
And they pay you for that?
Yeah.
Suckers!
Hanks' youthful attitude appeals to his boss, who is really tired of working with stodgy adults and all their research tests. Hanks tests toys the old-fashioned way. He plays them.
Chopsticks.
That's good looking, that's funny, a very good scene. But what makes the film extra special is the relationship that develops between Hanks and a female adult co-worker at the toy company, played by Elizabeth Perkins.
There's something I think I should tell you.
What?
You know, every one of these movies has that coming-of-age sexual sequence in them, and this film has one, but it is really sweetly and nicely written. The two of them are truly the heart of the surprising, endearing little comedy. We've seen similar scenes in other films. They haven't been written as well. Credit writers Gary Ross and Ann Spielberg, Steven Spielberg's sister, for that. And these characters as a couple haven't been played this honestly before. Credit Tom Hanks and Elizabeth Perkins for that. I liked this little movie called Big.
I liked it a whole lot, too. And, you know, the one thing that I figured out on seeing this film is if this is the fourth version,
right.
You know, if they do it long enough, they're finally going to get it right.
Right.
And this time what they realized is you don't have to have the exchange between two people. One becomes old and the other becomes young, and then you follow parallel stories.
Right.
This is just one guy. He's young, he becomes old. There's only one story, so there's twice as much time
to spend with him
on the character and twice as much time to get to know him. And it is really a good performance in terms of showing that that kid is inside.
Well, and the other thing that the time frees up is then he can have a relationship with somebody, and it can mean something, as opposed to if you got two people that have to relate to this one person and be shocked, like in the George Burns film 18 Again, where it's really his girlfriend or whatever. Everything's cut in half. This film really allows you to...
In the previous movies, it was misunderstandings rather than relationships. I also like the relationship here that he has with his boss, Robert Loggia, the man who was dancing on that piano.
Right.
He is the only guy in the whole movie who seems to understand exactly who this strange person is and why he likes him.
Robert Loggia is an actor who doesn't get enough credit. I'm glad you mentioned his name.
Coming up next, an erotic thriller named Call Me, about a woman who thinks she knows who's making those anonymous phone calls in the middle of the night, but maybe she's wrong.
What if he knows me?
Named Call Me, and you can say what else you want to about this movie, but it's definitely one of the weirdest movies of the year. It's got one of those crossword puzzle plots where everything fits but nothing seems to, and it's about a woman who witnesses a murder at about the same time she starts getting some anonymous phone calls. She thinks the first call is from her boyfriend, who tells her to meet him at a neighborhood bar, but after she's left waiting at the bar, she calls him and finds out, to her shock, that it wasn't her boyfriend on the line.
What a jerk I am.
What?
Forget it. Listen, I gotta go. I'll come over, okay?
Oh, okay. Look, why don't I meet you at your place?
All right, but be there. I'm leaving right now.
That's Patricia Charbonneau as the heroine, and Stephen McHattie as one of the bad guys in the movie. A moment later, in this bar, she witnesses a murder, and she doesn't know that McHattie may be involved with the man who committed the murder in the bar, but she begins to suspect that he may be the man on the other end of those anonymous phone calls.
How do you know what I look like?
I imagine.
Well, imagine this. I saw a murder, and it's your fault. So I don't have time for you and your third-rate porno.
That's really bright, blurting out a deadly secret like that to a stranger. What happens is the bad guys begin to think Charbonneau witnessed the murder and stole some of their money, so they follow her and her friend. Now, based on those scenes, you might think Call Me was a routine thriller, but there's some strange stuff in this movie, including one remarkable scene in which the woman and the anonymous caller begin to share their sexual fantasies. She is kind of getting into it at this point. The confusing thing, though, is that the movie never ever makes clear how this woman really feels about anything. Is she really turned on by the phone calls? She seems to be, but then she says she isn't. The movie has certain moments of undeniable power, but the screenplay and direction are amateur night. There are a lot of scenes in this movie of meaningless small talk which exist only so the crucial plot points can be laboriously introduced. My favorite is the completely unnecessary scene where a friend gives her some of those children's exploding caps, you know, that they bang when you throw them on the ground. And this is obviously a setup for her to scare the killers later on with them, but it's instantly forgotten, and she never does. Call Me is basically a couple of effective scenes lost in the middle of a directorial mess.
Yeah, well, I thought that the film had potential because the stuff involving what you would think it would be, the dirty phone caller and her getting turned on and that whole sexual involvement, those scenes are erotic. They're far out, but they're, interesting. And, of course, it's a good subject for a thriller. But then you get this whole drug sequence and the killing and the murder, and she says a couple of times, the lead character, Patricia Charbonneau, says, "Isn't that stupid what I just did?" And I wanted to say, yes, it is. And whoever had you write it as a character, have you say this, is stupid. They've really ruined potentially an interesting picture.
This is any kind of a movie like this has got to be pretty sharp because the audience is always sitting there saying, is the character doing the right thing? Is the character making a mistake? And when a character makes one dumb mistake after another, that's fatal. Then also when the movie just kind of meanders around, there must be 6 or 7 scenes in this movie that have no purpose.
They didn't have the courage to go, I think, hard enough with the sexual content of the film. If they had, they might have really made a wild picture. Coming up next, Crocodile Dundee 2 is a big hit at the box office. Is it any good? We'll have our opinions when we come back.
I kind of like the image.
Yeah.
You dig?
Yep. Dig. Is that part of the job? Digging.
Well, our next film is drawing huge crowds, but so what? Who wouldn't be curious to see the sequel to the very popular Crocodile Dundee? Once again, Paul Hogan plays Mick Dundee, the likable Australian adventurer who's part Aborigine, at least in spirit. He tamed and conquered New York in the first film, as well as an American reporter. It was a surprise smash hit worldwide. Now, the sequel features the same actors, but the opening New York scenes of Mick Dundee handling urban problems are old hat by now. Here he powers his way against the thug. Nothing special there. He was more subtle in the first film and funnier, too. And he was never as dull as he is in this scene, where he enlists help from a New Yorker after his girlfriend is kidnapped by a Colombian drug dealer.
She's still alive.
How do you know that, man?
Because that's the only way I can see her. Up here. But you can start to think she's hurt. The guts twist up. I can't think straight. And I'm no good to her.
That's just boring. The only place the film works is when Mick and Sue Charlton lure the drug dealers to his Australian outback, where Mick works some of his quiet magic.
Do you know where they are?
Yeah. About 500 yards that way, behind that ridge.
How do you know that?
Can't you smell it?
Their sweat?
Wally's aftershave.
That's cute. There may be 3 other cute bits in the outback, but the film never builds any momentum. And the love story between them is virtually ignored. And the whole setup, as I said before, in New York is worthless. In sum, a disappointing sequel.
Disappointing, yes, because it didn't have the freshness and the surprise of Crocodile Dundee, the original, where we didn't expect any of this stuff to happen. But what I liked about the film was the fact that it uses imagination rather than technology. Crocodile Dundee gets into the outback, it's the whole last half of the picture, and uses his craft and his art and his knowledge of the wilderness to outsmart these guys, instead of falling into the trap that so many sequels do, where the guy suddenly loses the secret of the original film and just turns into a violent Superman.
Well, he was more of a violent Superman in the first half of the film, and I didn't think if you just count the number of scenes that work and don't work in the outback, the trick, we know that's what he's going to do, and we wait and wait and wait. If you just count them up, I counted about 3 or 4. It wasn't enough for me.
3 or 4 worked. I must say I was rather surprised to see that old scene where they dress up the bad guy in the good guy's hat to throw off the
I mean, come on,
Rod. I haven't seen that since Hopalong Castle.
Are you voting thumbs up for this?
No, I'm not. I'm just pointing out that
wait a
some
second.
aspects that you didn't seem to
You got me confused there,
okay,
as well as the rest of the audience.
Happy to clear you out.
Thank you.
Okay, yes. Now let's recap the movies that we reviewed on this show. We agreed on Funny Farm, one of the year's funniest movies, 2 thumbs up. But a close split decision on Rambo 3. We agreed it delivered on the action level, but I wanted more character. 2 thumbs up for Big, the charming comedy with Tom Hanks as a kid who's inside a grown-up body. And 2 thumbs down for Call Me, where a couple of good scenes were not enough to save a confused plot. Finally, 2 more thumbs down for Crocodile Dundee 2, which doesn't have the magic of the original. And so, Funny Farm and Big.
Yeah, it's interesting. These 2 little comedies are both more interesting than the big ones, Rambo and Crocodile. That's it for this week. Next time, we'll be back with reviews of more new movies, including Sean Connery and Mark Harmon as soldier and cop solving a crime in The Presidio. And Bette Midler and Lily Tomlin star as 2 sets of twins in the comedy Big Business. That's next week. And until then, the balcony is closed.